roller bearings. We ran this thing for a little while. Bearings and all that worked out good, and on the drive side, where the drive of the motor is, it goes to the, the chain goes out to the motor up to this sprocket here. Interesting note, when you put torque on this thing, it puts thrust over to the other side, so it takes this sprocket when the chain is pulling on the sprocket, it pushes the whole piece over this way, so it has thrust over on here. So now you have the roller bearing that took care of the side loading on the ball bearings. Again, so the ball bearings, this wasn't a ball bearing application, it's a roller bearing application. We ran it with the roller bearings, and we ran it with soft bronze in there, brass in there, so that it wouldn't destroy anything if it started wearing, which it did. Noticed it was wearing, pulled it back apart, and noticed that we have obviously some pressure this way. The swing arm doesn't need a bearing in it. It's just not a good idea to put metal on metal, especially when you got a weak aluminum swing arm. You kind of want a little bit of a cushion in there, I guess. So anyways, this is just a quickie kind of a thing. It's brass to aluminum. The brass is definitely softer than, the bearing setup, but it's metal on metal. But eventually we're gonna put a piece of Delrin in here, a piece of black Delrin for the pivots. And then I bought, we took and got rid of all the inner races, all the inner races that they have, like all the different bearings. They got all these bearings stacked together, and what it does is it takes that little inner race right there, it pushes on that inner race, and it forces that inner race to go this way, while the outer race is staying stable. So it pushes that inner race to the side, and now the bearings are riding on the side of the race on the inside, and they're not meant to do that. These bearings are meant for an up and down load, not a spherical load or a side load. They're not made for a side load at all. And when you put those bushings in on the inside, some of them go together great, they don't make a noise and they're perfect, and then some of them do. They go in there and they push on the side of that race, and it starts clicking, and mine did that from day one. So that's why we took the roller bearing and put in there. And the roller bearing in this setup here, we don't know which bike it's out of. It's out of my buddy's stash, but basically this gets rid of all the inner bearing races, and it just clips right on through those roller bearings right there, and it is just the smoothest rolling thing you ever seen. But now it has side load. It has side load, so that's why that's wearing. So I bought thrust washers that we're gonna put on the side there. We're gonna put this thrust washer on the side, and then just because I like going a little extra, I've got thrust bearings going in there. So I'm gonna have two thrust washers, one on the inside, a thrust bearing, and then another thrust washer on the other side, so that now I know there's a bearing in there when this thing starts to thrust side to side. So anyways, yeah, this looks like this is going to work out pretty good once I get the whole thrust bearing taken care of. And now this piece goes all the way through the swing arm and over to the other side, and then in the shaft, this shaft basically. Okay, here's the right bearing for the application. That's the thrust washer, and then the new thrust bearer, the new roller bearing. That's a nice robust little setup there. I can take all of what that jack shaft can handle, and then any upgrades on the motor and all that stuff, this bearing will handle that no problem. This whole setup will take any upgrades you do, no problem, compared to those little ball bearings that they put in there. All right, so it goes on there pretty nice. Spins really nice. And then once we get that whole setup all pressed inside the jack shaft, this little thrust washer, and I have a thrust bearing that's coming. It's a bearing, actual bearing that's like a washer, but it has, you know, little roller bearings in there. Anyways, the thrust bearing goes between this washer and another washer, and between those two washers will be the thrust bearing. So any side load will be on this thrust bearing, not on the inner race of this bearing. This bearing, any side load, it just moves the however big a gap I put between the thrust bearing and the frame, or I'm sorry, the thrust bearing and the swing arm. This will have maybe about a 10,000ths worth of a gap to move a little bit. But anyways, that's miles ahead better than what was on the Sur Ron originally. There you go. Quick little update on the Bandit car. Getting our measurements. That is my axle and that is my third member, but this is the Bandit car's housing, so we're kind of getting everything worked out on it, getting the measurements figured out for the axles. Got all that figured out. Then we got the old Sur Ron that's getting tore apart and fixing up the back pivot point on that. But anyways, there it is. Bandit car getting done.